Today is my first ever guest interview on the show. Aw, I know. And it is none other than Olga Katic, who is the owner of Mushroom Mountain. Mushroom Mountain is a small business located in Easley, South Carolina, so just down the road from me here in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I have worked with Mushroom Mountain over the years from sourcing supplies for growing all things mushrooms. Now, of course, my first love and passion is always going to be the plants, but a very close second is learning all about mushrooms. And in my experience, the best way to learn about something is to talk to someone who is an expert in the subject. And today, I'm sharing with you a conversation that I had with Olga earlier this year, talking about the King Stropharia mushroom, also known as the garden giant, and why these mushrooms make such exquisite companions in our growing space. Whether you're growing directly in the ground or in raised beds or even in containers, this interview is going to teach you how to grow the garden giants and all of the amazing benefits that they have for our growing spaces. So before we get into this interview, I do just want to read a quick description from Mushroom Mountain's website so that you understand a little bit more about who you're hearing from today. Mushroom Mountain is an ecotourism hotspot for everyone interested in learning about the amazing world of fungi, and is home to the best mushroom trail on the planet, dedicating outdoor space for fruiting displays of mushrooms and other fungi, and has specific groups for visitors to examine, photograph, study, and admire. Here at Mushroom Mountain, our role is to steward the natural world. Mushrooms are a very important part of the natural cycle. They connect us all in ways we can't even imagine. Our company offers high-quality spawn, fruiting kits, mushroom-related gifts and books, workshops, and farm tours for our visitors and growers to expand their knowledge of fungi. Our goal is to spread the spores wherever and whenever we can. Welcome to the Growing Space Podcast. I'm your host, Farmer Erin, owner of the Patio Farmer, and I believe that no matter what size space you have, you can grow food at home. Tune in every Tuesday as I share my best tips, tricks, and encouragement for tending to homegrown edible plants. I'm here to support your food growing journey. The Growing Space Podcast is sponsored by Plant Club by the Patio Farmer. Plant Club by the Patio Farmer is a monthly subscription service I started in 2020. It's a membership-based opportunity to take your growing journey to the next level. With 4 different membership options, you get to decide the amount and kind of support that's right for you. All Plant Club members receive access to my online community through a platform called Circle. Having access to this platform allows members to share pictures, ask questions, celebrate harvest, and get to know each other. All Plant Club members also have access to free seeds each month, along with information on how to plant and tend to their crops, with seeding instructions and downloadable resources from the Patio Farmer's Resource Library. Membership starts at just $14 a month. Join Plant Club today by visiting my website, thepatiofarmer.com/membership. Hey, Olga, it's great to have you on the show today. I'm so excited for our conversation. And I was wondering if you could introduce yourself to the listeners, tell us all about Mushroom Mountain, your business, and all the things that you do as a mushroom farmer.
Okay, sure. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you for having me, Erin, as your first podcast guest, which is so fun. My name is Olga, and I own Mushroom Mountain in Easley, South Carolina, which is close to Greenville. We're in the upstate of South Carolina. And I started Mushroom Mountain in 2007 out of my house here, where, I'm talking to you from. And I had one of the rooms converted into a lab. And then my dad built me a gigantic greenhouse where I would, whenever I would make spawn, I would take the spawn down into the greenhouse, and then I would make oyster fruiting kits. And nowadays you see like these oyster fruiting chambers all over the place, and they have them in like small, like 5 to 10 pound bags. Well, I had these gigantic sausages cactus that I used to hang from the ceiling of the greenhouse. It looked a little bit crazy, but I fruited so many mushrooms in that space. And it was a lot of fun. And I used to sell the mushrooms at the markets and at some stores around here in the area. And then I basically outgrew my house and then moved to the new location, which where Mushroom Mountain is right now. I have 12 awesome employees, and we're all there for the same purpose, to spread the spores. Every single one of them is amazing. My lab crew, they make so much spawn. It's just unbelievable. Every day we are cooking and cooking and cooking. And besides the spawn, we have spawn in plug format, we have it in sawdust format, and then we also do grain. But besides that, we also make medicinal mushroom extracts, and we teach a lot of classes on mushroom cultivation. And then we have a lot of cute little fun events like solstice and equinox celebrations and tours. We teach young and adults, young people and adults on ecology, mushroom cultivation, and things like that. It's a lot of fun. Hanging out at Mushroom is fun. Yes.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That sounds really awesome. I love the mission of spread the spores.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I have a story. When my sister and I were little, I've been into mushrooms ever since I remember myself. So we lived in Bosnia, and there, my parents would go to work. They leave us with grandma. Grandma is working outside in a field, and me and my sister were outside too. There's no TV, no radio, nothing like that. We just were outside, exploring. And one of the things that we did was we foraged for mushrooms, for snacks, not just mushrooms, but plants and berries and all kinds of things. But mushrooms, I remember specifically because we would find like these giant porcini in the woods, and we would kick them and they would like explode, and spores would be flying everywhere. So I've been spreading spores ever since I was a little kid.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I am curious, what is your favorite thing about mushrooms? If you had to pick.
I would say I do. Well, there's a lot of things that are favorite about mushrooms for me, but one of my favorite things is just from my artistic perspective, just the way they look, and they're just so weird, in weird shapes, and tons of different shapes, tons of different colors, sizes. They can be like very, very small, and then they can be gigantic, so, and then they're growing all over the place. You find them on the ground, you find them underneath a log, you find them on a tree, they're everywhere. You find them on an insect, so that would have to be one of my favorite things, is just going out there and exploring and seeing them. And it really never gets old. For me, it doesn't. And whoever is out in the woods with me, they will be, if we're going out hiking and there's a lot of mushrooms out, I'm not hiking. I'm just stopping everywhere and going, oh my God, look at this mushroom. And, oh my God, look at this one. And look how pretty this one. Look at the color on that one. So I'm a mess. I would have to say that I feel like I'm a little bit obsessed with mushrooms, but that's okay.
Absolutely. It sounds like whenever I go to like a greenhouse or a conservatory, it takes me like 3 times as long to get through, because I'm like, oh my gosh, look at this plant. Or, oh my gosh, they have that one. Like, yeah, I can totally relate.
Yeah, I feel you there.
Yeah. Tell us about how mushrooms form. They're edible, but they're definitely not a plant. They're in their own kingdom, which is very different. Mushrooms are actually closer related to us than to plants, right?
They
So
are,
tell us, just introduce us to the anatomy of a mushroom. What all's going on there?
Sure. So when you see a mushroom out there, you are actually seeing a fruiting body. So they usually have a cap, they have a stem, and then they're either attached to the ground or they're attached to a log, or you can see them up in a tree. I mean, they come in all different types of shapes and forms. And sometimes they don't have a cap, or sometimes they don't have a stem. They're different. But the most common mushroom that when people think about mushroom, they're seeing like the red and white, Amanita mushroom. And so it has a nice cap. Underneath it has scales, and then it has that stem. And then, it has a little foot that attaches to, depending on what kind of substrate, right? But basically, what a mushroom is, if you want to compare it to, let's say, anything, if you want to compare it to like a tree, a mushroom it's a fruit, or let's say an orange tree. On orange tree, there's a bunch of oranges on there. Well, those are actual mushrooms, let's say. And the tree represents the mycelium, which is the real body of the mushroom. And that is underneath the ground, that is inside of a tree, that's like hangs out with a bunch of leaves. It's kind of like this mat. It's called mycelium. It's a mat of hyphae, which are tiny little filaments or little branchlets that come together and create like this thick mat. And once what happens is that mycelium or fungi, they break stuff down, right? So let's say they're breaking down a log, right? So when they're inside of that log, they're breaking down all the lignin and the cellulose, right? They break that stuff down and they make soil out of it and release nutrients out of the wood, which then is available for plants, right? To uptake. So that's one type of mushroom, and that mushroom is called saprobic. There is another type of mushroom that's called mycorrhizal. Mycorrhizal mushrooms are like porcini, chanterelles, and they what their mycelium does, it wraps around the root system of the plant, or sometimes even goes inside of the root of the plant or a tree, and they create like this symbiotic relationship, right? And so the symbiotic relationship, what it really means is that the mushroom, it depends on the tree for photosynthesis to feed it. So it feeds it like carbohydrates or sugars. That's what the mushroom needs to grow. On the other hand, the mushroom, because it's enveloped in its root system and all of that, it lives inside of its root system. It makes the nutrients that are in the soil more bioavailable for the tree. And then on another hand, a lot of people believe out there, I read a couple of books where it says that the mushrooms are also creating kind of like a highway for two plants to exchange information, exchanging information. So it's really cool. I love it. So two types of fungi that I'll talk about today. There's many other ones, but those two are pretty important. So yeah. But so what happens is the mushroom colonizes the piece of wood. When it reaches the end of the wood or leaf or whatever, it says, I've reached the end. And then it causes a trigger and it produces a mushroom. And the mushroom will grow, and then the spores will be created inside of its pores or its gills. And then once the spores mature, another trigger happens and the spores get released. And then the spores will travel around. They're going to land on another piece of tree that's dead or another leaf or something like that. And the spores will mate. They will create the little hyphae. The hyphae create the mycelium. And so the cycle begins again.
Mushrooms really are the coolest.
They are.
As you were talking about like how fungi and plants interact together in the soil, sometimes I'll get asked by clients, they'll send me pictures of their soil and it has mushrooms growing, and they're concerned about seeing mushrooms in their soil. And it's not a bad thing to see mushrooms in your soil.
Not at all. Even poisonous mushrooms out there, unless you have dogs, then you just go out there and pick the mushrooms and dispose of them. But you want to leave that mycelium in the ground, because what the mycelium does, it's speeding up decomposition. It's creating soil for the plants, and it really is just a sign of healthy soil.
For most of today's episode, we're going to talk about a very specific kind of mushroom, and you actually brought this to my attention. We did an event back in December for Plant Club, and you had mentioned the King Stropharia mushrooms then. And these are also called the garden giants, right?
They are.
And they have a really unique relationship with the soil and with our edible growing spaces. So introduce us to King Stropharia. Who are they? What do they do? And what are the benefits of having them in particular around our plants?
Okay, sure. Yeah. So King Stropharia, or Stropharia rugosa annulata, that's the scientific name for it. We also call them the garden giants, and that name comes from basically the fact that they can grow the size of dinner plates. I mean, big mushrooms. You don't want to eat them in that stage, but they can grow really, really big. And we also call them wine caps because they kind of taste like potatoes cooked in wine. So, that's another reason why we call them that. They're a native species in the US, and they can be found pretty much anywhere except for maybe the desert. And why they're important, like with the plants, again, it's because they speed up decomposition of wood chips, or any kind of woody material, they're going to break it down. They break down wheat straw, they break down wood chips, aged or like fresh wood chips, and they unlock when they're breaking it down, they unlock all of these nutrients that plants need, like potassium, like nitrogen, and there's another one, which is, I can't remember, but phosphorus. There you go. Which our plants need. And what do? We go to the store, and we have all of these, amendments that we put into the soil, when we can just do is just plant the King Stropharia around your plants. So it's a really cool one. Yeah.
Now, something that you just said that kind of piqued my interest. So you said that you can plant or cultivate King Stropharia on aged, like, wood chips. I actually harvested some of my shiitakes from spawn that I bought from you 2 years ago and inoculated some logs. But I know, like, through that experience with shiitakes and oysters and plenty of others, like, you want to use fresh, like, wood or trees that have just been cut down. But with King Stropharia, is it less sensitive to that colonization process?
Well, it is. You basically don't want wood chips that have been colonized by something else, because then mushrooms, they are very competitive. So they'll compete with other species of fungi to colonize the substrate, right? So if you have aged wood chips, by that I mean they've been sitting around and dried up, somewhere. And, if you see like that there is other little filaments, mycelium running through them, then maybe what you want to do is pasteurize them, and then you can add the King Stropharia spawn onto it. But aged is okay. It just needs to be uncolonized by other fungi.
Walk us through the steps. Like, say we want to cultivate some King Stropharia in and around our plants. Like, what do we need to know? And, like, how do we go about doing that?
It's pretty simple. You have pretty much 3 ingredients or 4. You have your spawn, your King Stropharia spawn, you have your wood chips, or if you can't find wood chips, then you can also use straw. And then you have cardboard. And cardboard we really use just to make sure that the moisture stays put. Okay, so the wood chips don't dry out too quick in the area, so you're not out there watering it all the time. And so what you do is you wet your cardboard, you shred it into pieces, take off all the tape. And if there's any like ink or something on there, don't use those pieces. Just use your cardboard, wet it down really good. And then you're going to place it around your plant, around the stem of the plant. And then you're going to sprinkle some spawn on top of that. Then you sprinkle some wet wood chips and wet straw. And then you just layer it. You can layer it all up to like 6 inches, right? And then you just wait. Your last layer should be straw, because, straw, it just also keeps the moisture inside. So layer it, and it makes it look prettier too, I suppose. And then you just wait. And then what's happening is the spawn gets off onto the cardboard. It starts hitting the wood chips. It creates like this mat all the way around, and it's breaking down all that substrate, and it's making soil. And while it's doing that, there's a few other things that it actually does too. The mycelium smells really, really sweet. And so it attracts earthworms. And then the earthworms will come in, and they're going to aerate all around your plant. Okay. And we know that aeration for the roots is really good as well for the plants. So first of all, it binds the soil. It attracts earthworms that are aerating, and then also depositing their vermicompost all over the place, which is another great addition for your plants. And then another thing that it does, it also kills nematodes. And we all know that there's some nematodes out there that are like we don't like. So what they do is they will feed on the roots of the plants, and they'll injure them, which then invites all kinds of viral infections and bacterial infections to the plant, and it can kill them. Well, the King Stropharia mycelium, it has like these finger-like projections that are called acanthocytes, and it actually like wraps itself around the nematodes and it kills them. It completely dissolves them, which is so cool. I think it's so cool. Not only that, but it also kills E. coli. So if you have pets, cats and chickens and whatever, they will deposit their droppings out there, and King Stropharia will break down the E. coli. It will kill it. Again, it makes soil, unlocks nutrients, earthworms. It's got so many good things about it that, adding mushrooms in your garden, the specific mushroom is a great thing.
I mean, I use wood chips as mulch in my aisles, of my beds and things. Like, why haven't I been cultivating these mushrooms? Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Think about how long it takes wood chips to break down just with bacteria. It takes a long time. It can take like a year. Sometimes they'll sit there for a year and a half, 2 years. But with King Stropharia, it can, within a growing season, it can break all that stuff down.
A lot of people who are listening are probably individuals who have smaller spaces. They might be growing primarily in raised beds or containers. And sometimes, if you're growing in a raised bed, you might have like landscape fabric at the bottom, or it could be open to the soil underneath. Do you still reap the same benefits if you cultivate the King Stropharia around raised beds, or does it need to be, do the beds need to be in the ground?
It doesn't need to be in the ground. As long as there is soil, this mushroom will grow. It needs soil. It needs bacteria in the soil to actually produce the fruit. So yeah, it can work in just your containers on your porch. If you don't have a garden, and if you are growing a little garden, on your balcony, you can introduce King Stropharia in there. Work just fine.
That's great. Yeah. Well, good to know. So, like, how would you get spawn for King Stropharia mushrooms? I know you said it's native, but
yes, if you can find them out in the woods, which I found it maybe once or twice in a wild here, then you can make spawn yourself. All you do is you pick up like the mushrooms you eat, but the mycelium and everything, you can just put more wood chips in there and it will just keep eating, But if you don't have that, then you can come to me. You can come to Mushroom Mountain and we sell. I'm actually working on a new product right now where you are not going to have to go and buy wood chips and mix it in with the spawn or any of that. I'm just going to have it like ready to put into your garden. You have your wood chips in there, you have your mycelium in there, and I'm also going to add some biochar in there as well. So, because apparently King Stropharia, they love biochar.
Oh my gosh, this is like the most magical mushroom for plants I've ever heard of. Oh, you'll have to keep us posted when that product is ready, because that sounds pretty incredible.
It's going to be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty easy to grow them, but people always have a lot of questions about, well, did I use enough wood chips? Like, how much area can I do with this bag? And I can go days and days like answering questions like this, but with a kit like this, it's going to be just place it around your plant and you're good to go. That's it. You don't need anything else. Just water it. That's all.
Amazing. Amazing. You mentioned that King Stropharia mushrooms are edible, right? They taste like wine-soaked potatoes.
They do. And even the stems, they resemble asparagus a little bit. So it's, yes, I know, weird, potatoes, wine, and asparagus.
I mean, I love all three of these things.
There you go. Just mix it all in. Yeah, the stems are really stringy. And and they're also kind of crunchy. So when you eat them, you're like, if you had your eyes closed, is this asparagus or is it wine cap mushrooms? I don't know.
Interesting.
Oh my goodness. Cool. I'm just kidding about that. But maybe we could trick some people.
What's the best way to harvest the King Stropharia mushrooms if you also want to eat them? So then how do you pick a mushroom?
So the King Stropharia, like I said earlier, they can grow to the size of dinner plates, but at that point, bugs are also in the stems and all throughout the cap. So, you'll find like all kinds of little worms in there. And so you don't want to eat them like that. The best time to pick them is when they're buttons, and the buttons can be like 3, 4, up to 6 inches big too, So before they open their caps completely, that's when you want to pick them and cook them like that. And you can store them in a fridge for about, for about a week if you just put them in a paper bag and put in the fridge, and up to a week they'll be good in there.
What's your favorite way to prepare them?
Well, you're thinking wine, risotto, mushrooms. For me, that's probably the perfect combination right there for the King Stropharia. Or sometimes if I'm lazy, I'll just saute them in some grapeseed oil or something like that, and then just put them over a salad. Spice, salt and pepper, and thyme, rosemary, whatever kind of herbs you like, and just over a nice salad. Perfect meal.
What happens after they fruit? Because as you've mentioned, like the fruiting process of the full organism usually happens, once the mycelium have taken over, once they need more room. So
Sure.
Once your mushrooms fruit, what's next in the process?
So they'll fruit twice in a season. They're spring and fall fruiters. In the spring, you'll have like a small little harvest, but then in the fall, it's going to be a much larger harvest. You don't want to mess with the whole like wood chips and all of that underneath the plant while that's happening. So spring through fall, don't do anything. After it fruits for the second time in the fall, that's when you can make another bed if you want to, or you can add more wood chips, which I usually don't recommend, because what happens is that those earthworms that have been attracted by the mycelium, they like to eat it. They like to eat the mycelium. So they'll eat all of it up. So if you make the bed in same area like you did before, they're just going to completely disintegrate it. They're going to eat it. So what you want to do is you want to rotate, plant it in another area of your garden, and then do that like every year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So kind of crop rotation with mushrooms. Nice.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, after hearing all of that, I mean, I think it's just a no-brainer to plant King Stropharia mushrooms everywhere. Yeah. Or not everywhere, but rotate them,
Yes.
wisely throughout your growing space. Right. I'm also assuming that a lot of people listening to this episode are brand new to the idea of growing mushrooms. Maybe they've heard of like foraging for mushrooms, or maybe they've tried their hand at one or both of those things. Like, what is a piece of advice that you would pass along to someone who is a budding mushroom aficionado?
Well, be patient, because mushrooms, they will do what they want to do. Sometimes, there might not want to fruit. Let's say that they have discovered a new source of energy, like right next to their little pile of wood chips that you had forgotten about. Maybe they're going to decide to munch on that and then not want to fruit until the fall, So just be patient and enjoy them. They're amazing. They're, watch them grow. Once you see the little buttons fruiting, within a week, they're going to be giants, and have fun. Yeah.
Okay, so you are officially my first podcast guest. Woo-hoo! Yes. And going forward, I would like to ask all of my guests these two questions. So, what would you say your favorite vegetable is, and why?
Well, I have many, so it's really hard for me to pick, but I grow my own tomatoes every year in the garden. And I'm not very good at growing larger tomatoes, because for some reason, we get a huge rainfall and I don't pick them on time, and then all the water goes in them and then they explode. But the little cherry tomatoes, those are, I love them. I love them. The little yellow pears and the tiny little black cherries and all kinds of cherry tomatoes. I just love them, because you're just walking through your garden and you're having your dinner right there. You just pop them in your mouth, and they're like tiny little like morsels of sugar and water. It's amazing. Those are definitely my favorites.
I always say, like, growing your own tomatoes, it ruins you for store-bought tomatoes. Like, I just can't.
Yeah.
I buy a tomato in the store. It's just a totally different fruit. Okay, and then another question to ask all my podcast guests is, what would you say is the most important thing that you have learned as a farmer?
As a mushroom farmer, I've learned that mushrooms are a very important part of our ecological system, and that if we didn't have mushrooms, nothing around us would break down. No trees would break down. Maybe some with like bacteria and things like that. Trees need mushrooms, mushrooms need trees. So just be good to your environment, be good to your garden. I've learned that not spraying and not just letting everything go, letting everything do its own thing is actually a beneficial thing. And don't grow grass, grow plants.
You're here. I agree. Grass is silly. I mean, it's okay. It's okay. It's fine. But there's just like an infinite amount of other options that you could be growing with the space that you have.
Yes.
But it's okay. Well, thank you, Olga, so much for spending some time with me and sharing all of your wonderful mushroom knowledge with us. As we are getting ready to wrap up, tell us how we can get in touch or reach out.
Yeah, our social media, our website is mushroommountain.com, and we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, so you can find us there. There's a bunch of us that hang out online and answer questions and post pictures and events and things like that. But most of all, come visit us. We have a wonderful mushroom trail that you can come see how mushrooms are cultivated. You can see how they grow, and you can get your own ideas how to grow your own mushrooms. So come see us if you're local, especially.
I know easily from Charlotte it's like a 2-hour drive. It's not that far. Well, thank you so much, Olga. This has been really wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my gosh, you guys. I don't know if you're leaving this episode feeling slightly obsessed and like really wanting to plant some King Stropharia mushrooms in your growing space this year. But like as soon as I wrapped up the call with Olga, I was just so excited and so invigorated with the idea of planting these mushrooms. I am just so thrilled. And I can't wait for that line of plant food to come out because I'm really curious to see how it will do in my soil. So I hope you enjoyed this first guest on the Growing Space podcast. I have several other interviews like this planned for you all throughout the spring and summer. I'll go ahead and share that next week's episode, I am going to have another guest on the podcast. And this one I am just equally thrilled about. I have invited Presley Williams and David Blackley from Renfro Hardware. Oh my gosh. Like kind of celebrities in the Charlotte gardening world. Super excited that they agreed to come on my podcast. Presley and David and I sat down over Zoom a couple weeks ago to talk about backyard chickens. Oh, yes. So if you have been thinking about, or maybe you're just curious about adding chickens to your growing space, then you will definitely want to tune in to my interview with Presley and David next week. We're going to talk all about the different things that you need to keep in mind as a backyard chicken tender. Sorry, you guys. If you're new to this podcast, I really love cheesy puns like that one. And for all of my regular listeners, thanks for putting up with me. But, we're going to explore the ins and outs of being a chicken parent, considerations around safety, chicken health, your setup, collecting eggs, breed types. I mean, we really go into a lot of detail in our conversation, and I'm so thrilled to share that with you next week. If you are brand new to this podcast, I would suggest that you go back and you listen to my very first podcast episode. It's just a good introduction to me and my business, the Patio Farmer, and the different ways that I'm here to support you in your food growing journey. If you are a returning listener to this podcast, then you already know that at the end of every episode, I like to share a fun fact, a little morsel of information to sign off on. And today's little fun fact comes from my 2024 calendar. So this is not the calendar that I wrote. This is not my Patio Farmer planning calendar. No, this is my personal calendar that my partner got for me for Christmas. This year's calendar is all about supporting pollinators, and it has really beautiful pictures of pollinators and plants that they love. And then there's always a little blurb that goes with the image and talks about what you can do to be supporting pollinators or just celebrating them for this month. It's all about turning your backyard into an oasis for pollinators. And they specifically speak about the painted lady butterfly. This particular butterfly loves plants that are related to nettles, mallow, and thistles, such as artichokes that we cultivate in our gardens. The artichoke is a host plant for the painted lady. The babies, they like to nibble on the artichoke leaves, and then once they become beautiful butterflies, they will pollinate and land and snack on the delicious nectar in the flowers of the artichoke plant. And if you're looking for seeds to grow artichokes, I actually have some in my online store. And I will put a link directly to the artichoke seed. I do ship those seeds throughout the United States. All of my seeds are safe for organic growing and come from really high quality seed companies. I'm very transparent about all of that. Okay, well, thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode with Olga, talking about the garden giants. And I can't wait to chat all about chickens with you next week as we hear from Renfro Farm. Thanks again for tuning into this week's episode of the Growing Space Podcast. I hope that you learned something new and that you were able to take this new information home with you and implement into your growing journey and into your growing space. As always, I am here to support you and your food growing journey. If you'd like to learn more about the different services and resources and membership programs that I run through the Patio Farmer, please check out my website, thepatiofarmer.com. You can also follow me on social media. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and oh my gosh, most recently, TikTok. Wow. I know. Here I am. Patio Farmer is on TikTok. It's very exciting. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a like or a rating or a review if you want. Maybe share a little comment about your favorite part of the episode. Share it with a friend. The more interactions I get with my little podcast online, the more I'm able to help people just like you in their food growing journeys. As always, thanks for being here, and I will see you again next week.